To do when he says he needs space. Hey, I'm Jack. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, you haven't yet subscribed, I'd love to have you with us. Just hit subscribe and be part of this community. I release videos all the time on authenticity, psychology, dating, personal growth, and how we can find better ways of being together. So let's get into this topic today. He's saying to you that he needs space. What's the best thing for you to do? So I want to just set a little bit of context, because this looks differently in different contexts. So if this is in the context that you are getting to know a guy, but you're not in a relationship, then I would encourage you to allow him to take his space. And I would encourage you to get curious. When does he want to come back into connection? And just notice what that interval is, right? If he never comes back, will you have an answer? Might be hard to be with reality, but he doesn't want a relationship with you. He's not available for that. If he comes back, let's say he comes back after a week, that is good information to you, right? Because that probably means that his sort of natural desire to be back into connection isn't one that's likely to be a cadence that works great for you in relationship. Now, I'm making a few assumptions here, right? You might say, gosh, a guy who disappears for a week and comes back, that's great for me. So if you're someone that likes a sort of lower frequency of contact in relating with someone, perfect. So none of this is about what is true for you. I mean, none of this is about me saying what's true for you. Let's find out what's true for you. But in gross orienting generalization, most of the women that I talk to would prefer a guy that comes back into connection sooner than that. Now, this doesn't mean to say that you have to make any decisions right now about whether to continue the dating, but it does mean to say we need you to make note of that data point. I would encourage you to write it down, put it in your journal, have a little journal about it, get curious. What's the impact of him being away for that period of time? Like, how is that for you? And at some point, he may want to take some space again, right? And then you notice, well, what is that cadence interval there? And at some point, you may also want to have a conversation about what the impact of that is on you. Now, this does depend where you are in dating, but if you're not someone who tends to talk about other people's impact on you, I would encourage you to step into this and practice. The practice is to say, hey, I notice when you do X, right? When you take a week and we're not in contact, this is what happens for me, right? I start to feel anxious. I start to have the headline that you're not taking the relationship with me or the connection with me too seriously. I start to wonder whether you're into it. I start to notice my attention drifts towards, maybe redirecting my dating attention, right? I'm encouraging you to be real and mature, right? We're not trying to play games with him. We're trying to say, hey, what's the actual impact? What goes on for you? This is a great practice, whether this goes anywhere or not. This is a great practice for you with friends, family, other places to get better at revealing impact. This is hard. I found this hard. This is not easy territory, but it's good and important territory. It's worthy of your practice. Now, if the context is you're actually in a relationship where you would both say like, hey, he's my boyfriend, she's my girlfriend, we're in a relationship, or something even more serious than that, then this is where your needs and wants about what works for you become even more important, right? Because this is not a hypothetical relationship. This is an actual relationship. It is, again, good if you can do it. If you can let him take space without a need to know when he's coming back into contact, it does provide you with some good data about, hey, what is his authentic desire, right? We're using his way of coming back into connection as a sort of proxy, as a yardstick for his desire to return to connection, right? It's not completely unproblematic, because it might be that, when he spends more time on his own, sometimes he gets like buried in work and he does have a desire to connect with you, but he kind of gets sidetracked with work. That, like, there could be some other dynamics in there, but because it's a real him taking action, it is pretty good data as to how he wants to come back into connection with you. The ideal, right, probably for most of you, is that you wouldn't have to set a time for him to be back into connection, and he wants to come back into connection somewhat quickly, right? So maybe, again, this is going to vary a lot between individuals and dynamics between people, but, maybe he wants to, take a day and have a day to himself, like he has a Saturday to himself, but then it's Sunday and he wants to see you and make a plan with you, right? For a lot of you, that would be great. For some of you, that might be too long for him to be out of connection. You have a right to your authentic desire, but what we're trying to do is honor what you need and honor what he needs, and get you sober and objective about the data you're receiving, right? That's kind of the highest path with this. Now, if him taking that kind of space without knowing when you reconnect tends to trigger your anxious attachment, then you may want to know when are we actually coming back into reconnection. And you might be quite flexible about, is it 6 hours? Is it 2 days? Is it tomorrow evening? Is it next Wednesday? But for you, just knowing allows you to kind of soothe and regulate, right? So then that would be a negotiation with him. Sometimes that kind of, if he's gotten to a point where he wants to take space, he's kind of moving from connection into autonomy. Sometimes that setting that date that we're going to be back into connection may not be an authentic desire for him, right? So it might be that you guys have to negotiate this. It might be that if he's not completely ready to set a time to connect with you, he might be willing to agree authentically to a time to communicate with you, right? So it might not be, hey, we're definitely going to see each other tomorrow night, but it might be, hey, we're definitely going to check in tomorrow night and you will hear from me, or we will have a call, and maybe that's enough for you, right? Again, there's lots of space here that we can co-create together if we're both able to get in touch with what our authentic desires are. Now, sometimes our authentic desires aren't compatible, right? But the best for most people, if your anxiety isn't getting triggered, is that actually you could let him go and he might come back into connection within a time frame that works for you, because then it's kind of coming from his desire, and so his movement towards you, probably you'll feel it energetically, and probably that's more of what you want. If that's not available, you set the time to connect, and again, you might be pretty flexible. You might, look, I don't need a call from him, I just want a text to say I'm alive and I'm thinking of you, right? So you can train a guy, what do you actually need? And if what you need is, a 2-sentence text and it needs to include a heart, again, it's free world. He doesn't have to do that, but kind of let him know, right? Or if actually for you just want to hear his voice and it doesn't matter to you whether it's a voice note or an actual live call, that's fine. Or if you need the call, but it doesn't have to be an hour, it could just be 5 minutes where he's present to you, let him know, right? Now, some of you hearing this would be like, oh my God, I need so much more than a voice note, a 5-minute call. Whatever's true for you authentically is what we're going for here, right? So I'm not you, I'm just putting out a buffet of options and menus, because sometimes we haven't really thought about these things in that level of granularity where you're like, oh, I keep saying I need to see him, but actually I don't need to see him. I just need to know that he's tracking me, and I can know that if he checks in with me. But maybe I need to be checked in with more than once. Or maybe actually what happens if he kind of goes away and I don't really know what his plan is, I start to get a bit anxious because I'm trying to track him and I'm like, I don't even know what he's doing. And so actually for me, it's not that I need to have a call from him, although I like it. It's I need to kind of know the plan. Like if he's going to spend some time with his mates, I'd kind of just rather know that. Or if he's going to go climb a mountain on his own, I'd rather know that. Now, again, he might have whatever his needs are for freedom and flexibility, or doing his own thing, or really feeling like he's on his own time. But again, that can be a negotiation. If he knew that the reason that you might want to know where he is not about keeping a leash on him or trying to control him or trying to take away his freedom, is actually that you care that he's safe, and if he can give you some kind of indication he's safe, maybe he can achieve that by just location sharing with you, or agreeing that he's going to check in the moment that him and his friends arrive at the lake that they're doing the weekend at, and that's all you need to know, that they're kind of safe. So negotiate is not a bad thing to negotiate, right? No two people have the same authentic desires. So ideally, this movement between connection and autonomy is one that you might have broadly similar enough strategies that it's compatible. Sometimes it just isn't. Sometimes you have to kind of work at it and see, can we work it to a better place? One thing that you can practice, if you are able to relax on needing to know when the next time you're going to see him is that it could also allow you to move more freely along this connection autonomy polarity, right? So this isn't always true, but sometimes one person occupies one of those energies more than the other. And in gross-orienting generalization, it can sometimes be the guy is more fighting for his autonomy and the woman is more fighting for connection. Again, gross generalization, you might be like, no, that's not me. I love the autonomy and he needs to see me more than I need to see him. Totally fine. But I'm just going to run this example as if it were true. And so what we want is for you to not get unconsciously identified with the polarity of connection to the point that it starts to restrict your authenticity. So even if it's difficult for you, it might be good for you to occasionally to say, yeah, I'll see you when I see you. I'd love to hear from you. whenever that's right. But I've got, I'm going to make some plans with my girlfriends. I'm going to go do a self-care retreat. I'm actually going to take myself off to the spa. I'm going to go see my gran. I'm going to go spend some time with my brother. I'm going to pile into my work. I'm going to write. Fill your life with things that you like and want, and have you practicing being in that autonomy and seeing, not to create a reaction, but seeing authentically what is the impact over there. Because sometimes if you start to really move into your autonomy, for some guys who tend to hold down that autonomy polarity more, that is attractive to them, and it actually draws them into connection. Right? So you're not doing it to sorry, I got an ant in my shoe. You're not doing it to manipulate him into it. You're doing it to free you up from being stuck on a polarity unconsciously that you didn't even know about. Right? So maybe you, if you sort of listen to this and you're like, oh, this is new territory, maybe you could just make a list of activities that you do under connection and autonomy, and notice which ones have you in either side of those polarity, particularly in the dynamic with him. And if you notice, like, wow, there's not many ways for me to move into my autonomy. Like, yeah, when he's not around, I actually don't tend to do all these different things. Maybe there's some way that you could still do these things that would feel good to you and feel safe to you, and would actually create a little bit more polarity and kind of dynamism and freedom, ultimately, in the connection between you. Now, if ultimately his authentic desire is he just kind of goes off radar and he comes back at some time of his choosing, and that amount of time is way too much for you, then you need to have a heart-to-heart with him. And ideally, you approach this from a place of discernment, not judgment, right? Which means discernment. I'm discerning what I need, right? What you need in some ways is impersonal to him, because if something happened to him, or you guys weren't in relationship, or you decide to break up with him, you're going to be in a relationship probably at some point with someone else, and you'd still be having to figure this out, right? So you could say to him, like, I notice it just doesn't work great for me when you kind of move into autonomy, and I don't hear from you for 3, 5, 7 days, one afternoon, whatever it is, and I'm not making you wrong for that. That's a really useful phrase, and it might not seem genuine to you if you're like, yeah, I'm making you wrong for it, but practice. Even if there's just a part of you that can get into this, even if it's just 1%, right? You can say there's a part of me that doesn't want to blame you for this, right? And it's not working great for me. You might need to do that, but it's not working great for me. So I want to brainstorm with you. I want to co-create with you. I want to see what are our menu of options. Are there some kind of co-created reality that we can dream up between us? If we both have a magic wand, that would work better for you and work better for me, right? That's why I was trying to get into that granularity of, is it about meeting? Is it about a virtual call? Is it about physical presence? Is it texting? Is it knowing he's safe? Is it knowing he's thinking of you? Because it might be, for instance, that he can send an emoji that just says, hey, I'm thinking of you, and that doesn't really interrupt his experience of autonomy. But perhaps if he's got to nail down into a set time he's calling you, perhaps that does start to restrict his autonomy in a way that, from his experience, sort of cheats him a little bit of getting that full experience of autonomy, and then doesn't have him coming back to you with such a desire for connection, right? If you can align with his autonomy and his with yours in a way that then when you come back into connection, it's more sort of full-blooded, that is probably what most of you want. But if that rhythm, if it takes, 5 weeks, I'm kind of blowing this up to make it an extreme example. If it takes weeks for him to want to come back into connection, unless that's what you really want, that probably isn't going to work for you. But better that you guys find this out and actually try to sit down and kind of have this negotiation. And if you can, it can be really challenging, but if you can do it from a place of non-judgment and blame, right? So you're not in the reality that he should want to come into contact sooner than he does, or he should want to call me. You actually can be maybe in your self-esteem enough that you're saying, well, actually he doesn't want to call me that quickly. Now maybe that doesn't work for me, but it's good that I know that, right? Because there's a difference, him kind of reaching out to you because he wants to, and him reaching out to you because it's your request and he's accommodating your request. Now, I'm not saying that everything in relationship has to be authentic desire. Sometimes you might do something that's like, yeah,